Hello everyone, welcome along to 98 Not Out. Remember, as always, if you like this content, subscribe, tell your friends, spread the word. Today I'm talking to David Griffin from Derbyshire County Cricket Club, a superb account on Twitter, brilliant stuff. I'm looking forward to this. Let's get into it. Bizarrely, on a Sunday morning in October, the 8th of October, the weather outside is absolutely perfect for playing cricket. And joining me today from an equally sunny-looking Derbyshire is Derbyshire's official club photographer, I think, to give him one of his many titles, is David Griffin. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's a little overcast at the moment, but the forecast is excellent. So I'm looking forward to spending at least some of the afternoon with my feet up in the garden, listening to some of the World Cup on the radio.
But it's funny, isn't it? We could have done with this weather a few weeks ago when the county championship was heading to its climax, when rain seemed to get in the way of one or two of the more important games.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of rain down at Bristol. We had some at Derby. We lost a couple of days' play. I guess it's one of the vagaries of the English summer. I know there was a lot of hand-wringing about the fact that, we'll be playing in September, what do you expect? But I think a glance through my photographs for the last 20 years will show that most September's actually kind of okay. And I've seen some horrendous washouts at the height of summer. So I think it's the English summer, sadly, I'm afraid. We can't do much about it. As we often say in the press box, you can't play the weather. So just play the game when you can, really.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the Ashes was affected hugely by downpours at Headingley and Old Trafford, wasn't it? So, and that was in July. So, yeah, exactly. So for those that don't really know, Griff, as I like to call him, is well known on Twitter amongst cricket followers for a really excellent account, which I suggest everyone follows just for the pure entertainment value. On the face of it, it's an account of what's going on at Derbyshire cricket. But intermingled with that are some absolutely fantastic anecdotes about long toes and how I met my wife, which I'll get into talk about in a minute. But also, what really impressed me and what really perked my interest was you do speak a lot of sense, David. And I think cricket seems to be, certainly this year, incredibly divisive. And there are a lot of keyboard warriors and people that should know better spouting all kinds of nonsense about the county game. You've been a real beacon of common sense for me, at any rate, particularly when there was talk about Yorkshire being bought out by one of the IPL franchises, which on the face of it got a lot of people's feathers up. But you nailed it by saying this just can't happen. It's not as easy as that, and pointed to small details like club structure and all the rest of it. How did you spot that when no one else did?
Well, I was on the committee at Derbyshire from 1999 to 2014. And I got there by accident because I launched a campaign in the winter of 1998, based really upon frustration amongst members at the way that the Derbyshire Committee at the time behaved and reacted towards members. And it led to the complete overthrow of the old committee, and I was then elected onto the new one. And I'd always had a fascination with how the club was run and how it was managed. So I got involved in actually writing the club rules. And then as the various changes took place over the years, and particularly with ECB governance, which came in the last 2 or 3 years, where clubs have moved from committees to boards, I had a real interest in that. And I had a real interest because, for example, slightly digressing, there was a framework which county clubs were asked to follow, which the ECB published for the counties, but only for the county committees of the day. So when I contacted my own county and said, can I see the framework? They said, no, the ECB don't want you to see it. So I contacted the ECB. I said, can I see the framework? They said, no, ask your county. So we were being asked as clubs to change our constitutions in line with an ECB framework that no one outside of the existing committees could see. So it was just, you're just left thinking, a phrase that was uttered to me many years ago when we were talking about conspiracies, and this gentleman said to me, whenever you're looking for conspiracy, never ever rule out incompetence. So I've never thought that this was about a conspiracy, but I did think that at times people just didn't really know what they were doing. And so I had a fascination with, how do you get rid of a cricket club? How does it go? What do you do to get rid of it, or what do you do to get to change its constitution? And fundamentally, it's just not as easy as it sounds, and that's good, because there's a protection in there to look after a cricket club. Now, at the same time, there are those who would decry that and say, so you've got a few old farts are able to protect the constitution of a cricket club, or even the existence of a cricket club. But I would argue that that's safer than letting it go into private hands, because we see what happens with football. There's very, very few people who follow football who are absolutely delighted with the owner of the day, because they can't do anything about who he or she is.
Yeah.
They can't get rid of them. They can't do a thing. Whereas cricket, for all its elitist overtones, and for the suggestion that it's very much a game based upon class, etc., actually 15 of the 18 clubs are still owned theoretically by the community. If the community choose not to buy a membership and get involved in that ownership, that's up to them. But Derbyshire is still effectively owned by people from the county and outside who have genuine interest in that county. I think that's brilliant, and it's to be protected.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you use a good. You mentioned football. Southend United are just down the road from me here in Essex, and they've undergone terrible times recently with poor ownership and poor management. Just this week, they finally sorted out the club's been sold, and it's given new hope to all the supporters. But yeah, cricket is good. Do you think there's a case though for the constitution to be regularly reviewed or amended?
I think yes. I think one of the problems with cricket is that there's this desire to have more business people connected with the game, and that's certainly true if you look at the rules of most county clubs. My own county, for example, it makes it clear that if you want to be on the board, you've got to fulfil a certain number of different criteria, which I think is good in certain aspects. It's quite right that if you've got a place reserved for cricket on your board, that person should have played first-class cricket and ideally have played it to a good standard, because you want someone who understands that. All I would say is that when I joined the Derbyshire Committee in 1999, the then ECB, which was a fledgling organisation, it's only been running for a couple of years post TCCB, and they issued a document which showed that county cricket had no debt. Collectively, there was no debt. Fast forward 23, 24 years to a time where county cricket is run by, in inverted commas, businessmen, and it is largely men, and they are largely from business. We have debt of 300 million. So for all the great business people that have come into the game, in many ways, was it run better when it had ordinary cricket lovers who just loved the game of cricket and didn't want to see harm come to it? It's a question for debate, but I'm not sure always that the sport that gets richer is necessarily good for the game, because cricket's got richer beyond its wildest dreams in the last 20 years. But every county has got further into debt, as with football.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I'm old enough to remember wandering down to Chelmsford and watching Gooch and Lever and Fletcher and the like. No sponsors' logos emblazoned anywhere. Very little round the ground advertising, from what I can remember as well. Even when you look at England from that time, it's a very, very different scene. And the car park being full of Toyotas with so-and-so sponsors, Graham, written right down the side of the car.
Toyotas, wow, in Derbyshire, Red Sharma had a Skoda. A sponsored Skoda, which in the 1980s, I mean, today they are reputable vehicles, but in the 1980s, they were usually compared with skips, weren't they?
That's right. Yeah. Youngsters listening to this won't see what a problem with Skoda is, but yeah, as you say, if you've got a memory that stretches back to the 80s and even the 70s, Skoda were a totally different kettle of fish. Yeah. So your account is fantastic.
Thank you.
It's a huge. It's very, very entertaining. You're very, very good. And I suppose the crux of it is it's a real love letter to Derbyshire County Cricket Club. And it's a mixture of you covering matches and sort of giving live reports, but also it's intermingled with pictures and comments of days gone by. And just looking through it ahead of this chat, I'd forgotten just how many fantastic players have graced the county ground now. Obviously, the late great Mike Hendrick was one of the fantastic players when I was growing up, both at county level and at England level. But yeah, I'd forgotten that Mikey Holding pulled on the shirt as well.
Yeah, he played more games for Derbyshire than anyone else, including the West Indies. He came in 1983. He stayed until 89. So only John Wright, of overseas players, played for longer at Derbyshire. And he was part of that revolution at Derbyshire, which Kim Barnett, who was the captain, and Phil Russell, who was the coach. When Kim became captain at 22 in 1983, he said, right, if we're going to compete, if we're going to take Derbyshire from being a ragtag outfit that are seen as also rams and a rubbing rag, if you like, by other counties, we have to do something positive. And the best thing we can do is sign the best available fast bowler. And one of the joys of watching Michael Holding play, apart from the fact that he was such a good cricketer, a world-class cricketer, was watching him bat, because, of course, he very rarely, if ever, wore a helmet. Yeah. And we took great delight in travelling around the country and watching Michael and seeing opposition supporters when he wandered out to bat. And you'd hear the comments, oh, he's not got a helmet on. Why is he wearing a helmet? And, of course, no one bounced Michael Holding. And it's hard now to because everyone is covered up, you know, and not you're not allowed to not wear a helmet. But back then it was fabulous to watch these bowlers run in and thinking, yeah, but you know, if you've got any sense, you will not bowl a short delivery. And occasionally you'd get a young, I mean, the overseas certainly never bounced each other, but occasionally you'd get, or the overseas bowlers didn't, but you'd occasionally get a young English bowler who was perhaps a little green round the gills, would put one in short at Michael, and you think, I don't envy your opportunity later on when it comes to that. But he was wonderful. I still retain a friendship with Michael, which is largely via email and occasionally via a WhatsApp and what have you, because he was such a character and he was so important to Derbyshire at that time. People forget the emergence of Devon Malcolm, who was a young cricketer who was, you know, he had the wrong prescription in his glasses, so he couldn't run in straight. He ran in almost slalom to the wicket, and yet became a devastating fast bowler, wonderful cricketer. And Michael Holding was very much instrumental in cajoling him and encouraging him, and most importantly, about telling him to continue bowling fast. Because, of course, there was a typical English approach, which happened to me. I was never good enough, but it was a slow down, get your length and line, get your length and line. Whereas Michael's approach to Devon was, you've been born with searing pace, use it. And of course, Michael was also instrumental in bringing Ian Bishop to Derbyshire. So it was fun times in the 80s and 90s, having people like that around who were bowling quick, alongside people like Dominic Cork, of course, Phil de Freitas, you know, we had a proper pace attack back then. It was fun to watch, that's for certain.
That's what I mean. You know, I sort of look back and, you know, I'd forgotten just this whole catalogue of cricketing greats that have appeared for Derbyshire. It's absolutely amazing. You mentioned Ian Bishop. I mean, yeah, Holding as well. Two of the great voices of the commentary box in recent years as well. Bishop was just fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. So intermingled with all that, and I noticed today you put on it was an anniversary of something that happened in Glossop in the dim and distant past.
Oh, Joseph Bowden.
That's right.
Birth, yeah, Joseph Bowden. Well, you've got to give them. I mean, basically, every cricketer, we've had 748 of them, so I try to get every one of them's birthday out there. Although there are 4 cricketers we don't have a birth date for. So I think I mentioned them. I think it's usually Halloween because we haven't got a cricketer born on the 31st of October. So I think those 4 get a mention. But yeah, I try to do basically what I do every day. I do on this day, and fortunately, there's usually something happening on this day every day.
Yeah,
which is useful.
Well, one of the features of the radio show is cricketing birthdays of the week, and it's always quite interesting to see the names that crop up, but also the ages of some of them. There are a lot of people that are older than you think they probably are in your mind, but also people that are a lot younger as well. It's always it's always a rich vein of information to do things like that. I've got one friend. I've never been to watch cricket in Derbyshire, but I've got a friend that's from Bakewell, and when he got married, I was living in France at the time, and I flew up to Manchester, and he picked me up from Manchester Airport and drove me back across Snake Pass. And I was reminded of that reading your piece today about Glossop, and we went through Glossop, and he said to me, "Oh, Glossop, the world's most miserable place. It's awful," and sped up, and we headed up through Derwent Water and back to Bakewell. And I've never forgot. I must go to Glossop to see what it's all about. Surely it can't be that bad, can it?
Well, of course, Derbyshire played at Glossop way back in the dim and distant. The Hillwood family, who if you're into football, which I think you are, were hugely associated eventually with Arsenal.
All right.
But they originally owned a mill in Glossop. And at the time, Hillwood, who was associated with Derbyshire through playing and secretarial work at Derbyshire, said, bring a game to Glossop, a county game to Glossop, and I will guarantee the gate. In other words, I'll put £100 on the gate, so even if nobody turns up, you'll get paid, sort of thing. So the connection with Glossop goes back to the late 19th century when Derbyshire took games to Glossop. But also, of course, a very, very famous, well, I say it's famous. Quite how many people know about it, I don't know. Although Neville Scott did a really good piece in the most recent edition of The Cricketer about Charles Olivier. And Charles Olivier was the first black cricketer to play county cricket. He toured with the non-first class West Indies touring team in the late 1890s, and Derbyshire offered him a contract. And he came to England, but of course had to qualify, as was the procedure back then. Even if you were born in Nottinghamshire, you had to, if you wanted to play for Derbyshire, you had to move into Derbyshire and then qualify. So Olivier was given a job, this young West Indian from Trinidad, given this job, working as a clerk in Glossop, and at the same time playing cricket for the Glossop Cricket Club. And from a social perspective, it must have been remarkable having a young West Indian up there, because it's highly unlikely that anyone in Glossop had really said. I know it was relatively close to Manchester, but a long way from Liverpool, for example, from a port. So it's highly unlikely in 1900 that the people of Glossop had seen a black person, never mind a black cricketer. And it would be fascinating to know what the challenges were for him up there. But he qualified, played for Derbyshire, played in what is described by John Shawcraft as the greatest ever county cricket match ever played at Chesterfield in 1904 against Essex, when Essex made 597 in the first innings, with Perrin making 343, and they lost, which is quite remarkable, because Olivier scored 229 and 92 not out. It was a remarkable performance. And just this time last year, actually, last October, I went up to Glossop because a lot of work had been done about Olivier, and they unveiled a heritage blue plaque to him at the pavilion in Glossop. And we didn't realise he'd ever had any children, but there's been some really good work done, not by me, but by others, who'd located a grandson who came up, who lives in London. And he came up to the ceremony and actually unveiled the blue plaque. It was a wonderful, wonderful occasion. So if you go to Glossop, at the very least, go to the cricket ground. It's the Cricket and Bowls Club, I think. I think it's in conjunction with Bowls, but the lovely cricket ground, big pavilion. And there on the wall is the blue plaque to Charles Olivier.
You know what? I'm going to do that. That alone is a reason to go and visit and banish my memories of my mates' comments. Disparaging comments about this.
Well, and also when I went up to Scarborough for the 4-day game against Yorkshire last month, I went to Fylingdales, where Olivier's grave is, at St Stephen's Church. I went and got a photograph of the grave and the headstone. So and as I say, Neville Scott's done a lovely piece in The Cricketer about him. So I think it's an important individual, a very, very important individual, because it didn't really bring about a flood of West Indian cricketers to England thereafter, but they did eventually come. But you could argue he was kind of a trailblazer.
Well, definitely, and as you say, from that period of history, it is remarkable on its own. County cricket, if you listen to those in suits and blazers and club ties, county cricket is doomed. The future is franchise, it's fireworks and DJs and all the rest of it. I'd argue the opposite. I think when you go around, certainly at Essex, but certainly amongst the unfashionable counties, and with all due respect, I'd chuck Derbyshire in that loop as well.
Yeah,
but they're not. And I was talking recently to Annie Chave from County Cricket Matters about the whole community feeling that the community that county cricket clubs create and feed, if you like. It's not as bad as people would have us believe, is it? The county scene.
Not at all. I mean, spend a day at Scarborough during the 4-day game, go to Cheltenham for the 50-over game, as I did earlier this season, the Yorkshire game up at Chesterfield, our 50 over fixtures at Derby in August when, you know, children were off school and the sun was out. You know, there is, of course, still a big interest in county cricket. For me, I think the fundamental issue for the game is that there is a whole host of money that comes into cricket, and provided cricket can sustain all these different strands, then why not? Because for me, the only way, let's just say there was a plan to get rid of county cricket, all that would happen is the money that currently goes from the ECB to the counties that play county cricket would go somewhere else. And in all probability, it would just be into players' pockets. So I just believe passionately that while the entire game can be sustained, and whether that is Test cricket, ODIs, international T20, franchises, or anything else, provided there's enough put aside to allow county cricket to continue and enough put aside so that recreational cricket can continue, then I say, why not? Why not? Because cricket is absolutely, and the first video I did actually on Twitter was about this, because someone had said something somewhere about county cricket disappearing, and my first video on Twitter was what Derbyshire means to me. And I described how Derbyshire meant to me. It was a family. It was part of my life as a boy when my parents divorced, and I looked for something else to sort of envelop me. And without understanding what was happening at the time, it was Derbyshire cricket that did it. And over the years, that tremendous fellowship just grew and grew and grew. But you look at Derbyshire today, and we're going to have 10,000 people in the ground in a month's time for a fireworks event, which will bring the community of Derbyshire together. There's a fun fair and everything else. Yes, it'd be great to get 10,000 there to watch a game of cricket, but it's providing something for other people. I get to the ground at 7 o'clock in the morning on a match day, and there are cleaners there cleaning the ground. These are people who are employed to do work within the, you know, from the local community doing their work. It's a wedding venue, it's a conference venue, it's all sorts of different things, and it's not just about 20 cricketers. It's much, much more than that. And I think while the game can sustain it, then more power to its elbow.
We could talk all day, and I'm now utterly convinced. I kind of had this feeling before that we're going to have to get you on in the future for regular updates. It tends to happen with a lot of the people I talk to, but it's been a fantastic pleasure, David. Great to meet you, and keep up this brilliant Twitter or X or whatever it's called this week. The content is fantastic. I would advise anyone that's listening or watching to this, just follow it. Look for David Griffin on Twitter. You'll find it pretty easy enough. If you're into cricket, you'll have probably seen someone retweet it, and least of all me, and give it a follow. And it's not all heavyweight stuff. And just before I go, David, is that true about how you met your wife?
What did I say? Where did I say I'd met her the last time you watched?
Was it you got thrown out of somewhere, or she got thrown out?
Oh no! Most of them aren't. Most of them aren't. Funny enough, I had friends round for lunch yesterday, and we did actually explain how we met. This is the true story of how we met. Both of us had been bereaved by our previous partners, and neither of us were looking for romance. And I was watching cricket down at Northampton, and it was a one-day game on the Sunday. And I went down with a mate of mine, and we got absolutely blind drunk on the Saturday night, and stayed in this hotel before the game on the Sunday. My wife, my now wife, was at a salsa dancing convention. This is true. I know it sounds like it's one of my jokes, but she was at a salsa dancing convention, and she came out of this room and she got this dress on, all spangly, and she looked a bit shiny. I remember saying to her. And so I started talking to her, and she, bear in mind, she was bereaved and I was bereaved. She was like, I don't want this. And then I said to her, I said, which one of this lot's your husband then? And she says, I haven't got a husband, he's dead. Which normally is a bit of a showstopper. You know, it kind of, well, that's it. And I sort of stood there and went, yes, this is absolutely true. Yes. And I shouted to my mate and I said, his wife, her husband's dead. And of course, in my drunken stupidity, what I was trying to get across was the fact that it was somebody I could sit and have a chat with, and we could perhaps understand each other's losses. And we did till about 4 o'clock in the morning. And she wandered off, and I wandered off, and I did slip a phone number on a piece of paper and gave her I said, if ever you're interested. And I remember watching her walk off to her room and thinking, what, of all the times to meet somebody like that, well, I wish I'd met her years ago or whatever. And from there, it developed through a friendship over the phone, because we lived 30 miles, 40 miles apart. And then eventually to marriage. So, yeah, we know, but that is the true way in which we met. I think what I'd said last time, she got thrown out somewhere for fighting at a Laurel and Hardy convention. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, she liked that. She quite liked that. But that's not true. What I've just told you is definitely the truth.
You're giving your age away. The days of thinking you've met someone you pulled because you've given them your phone number, that doesn't exist these days, does it? They have to swap social media and God knows whatever.
Very odd. Very odd. I wouldn't know where to start, Frank.
No, me neither. Me neither. David, been an absolute pleasure. Really talking to you.
Nice to meet you.
We'll have to get you back again. There's always something to talk about, and I think you're the man to shed common sense and a bit of levity on the whole thing as well. So many thanks, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Darren. Cheers, mate.